Hello, welcome back. Today we are at STEM recording with Curtis Grippe. I said that correctly, yes?
Grippe.
Grippe, my bad, Curtis Grippe.
I've heard worse. I've been called worse.
Well,
Folks.
we've only, this is the second time that we've actually hung out in person. I've only met you last year.
Yeah.
And, but it was great. I came down here, you showed me the place. It's a fantastic studio. It's a place that I really hope to do a project soon. I've been trying.
Bring a band.
Yeah. But tell me, I mean, I'd heard about this place for at least a year or two before I'd actually hooked up with you through Dan Tomlinson and saw it.
Yeah.
But how long have you been here?
I built the place. I started building it 12, 13 years ago, and then we were tracking within 2 years of that. So about a little over 10 years we've been tracking in here. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a very, it's definitely like a very involved, it looks like a pretty involved build. Did you have any help? It was all kind of you and friends, or?
I had it designed. We basically laid it out on the ground. We put cardboard cutouts of what we thought would be the couch and the console, and literally laid it out in the dirt. Thomas and I, Thomas Laufenberg from Ghetto and Dead Hot, we kind of laid it out, and then I had an acoustical engineer give me guidance on size and wall angles, mm-hmm. and then he designed all the treatments, and I executed the construction of them. So I had a contractor build the shell, and I did mm-hmm. everything inside, all the wiring, all the electrical, everything. Thomas and I soldered every cable.
Everything, huh? Well, that's great. I mean, and I haven't had a chance to hear yet personally, but my good buddy Anthony Brandt, who we just recently did a video with, like I was telling you before.
Oh, did you do one with him?
Yeah, we did.
Oh,
we
good.
did a mixed discussion one at his house. But like I said, he loves this place.
Oh, cool.
He tells me constantly, he's like, "Yep, we're doing it at STEM, or we're planning on taking it to STEM." You know.
Good.
And
yeah, he did great work here.
Yeah, he can't wait to come back. He told me the room sounds great, and I heard tracks. It sounds great.
Cool.
But also the name STEM is a very familiar word in recording world, mm-hmm. and I was just curious kind of how you landed on.
My daughters are Stella and Emily.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and so I call it STEM recording. Yeah, and on occasion I'll do some mastering that way, have it mastered separately, but most of the time I do 2-track. But
oh, you mean like STEM mastering stuff? Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's something that's I haven't really messed too much with, but I know you and I know Mike Bolenbach sometimes prefers to master that kind of route.
Depends on the vocals. There's times where I know that for the instrumental parts we're going to need to do some stuff, you mm-hmm. know, and maybe some low end treatment or whatever. And there's times where I just like where the vocals are. So if that's the case, I'll send them separately and say, don't mess with these too much. Mm-hmm. Do what you got to do over here. And it's, same with, I know guys who send in everything separate, guitars, drums,
right?
And yeah. I don't like to leave too much, on his plate. I'm a mastering guy, but
yeah. No, I'm definitely big on the whole, committing to something and trying not to leave too much, mm-hmm. Decision making later. But I will say that, I can see how when you get to that mastering process, not to go too far on a tangent here, but when you get to that last stage and you want to just have, maybe some slight control over last minute automation to make tracks pop or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting. So that's where STEM came from. And then we were talking about it a bit before when we were prepping and stuff about how you kind of came into recording, because you are, of course, a musician. Mm-hmm. And I think most people in industry, there are some that just kind of say, I want to be an engineer.
Right.
But most of us, myself included, were musicians first, and then we kind of stumbled into recording. And your story that you've told me is very similar to that. And,
yeah, and we recorded at a level where it kind of mattered. We were on a label, mm-hmm. and we were in nicer studios with professionals, and it was a great learning experience. It was a different, and watching bands approach, signed bands now approach it and seeing the difference. It's a lot different now than when we did it. There was no, take 10 drum tracks and I'll edit you while you're gone. The only editing took place right there with the grease pencil and a razor, and that mm-hmm. was it, right on the spot. So it was a little bit different then, but the things we did in preparation then, I would love to see people do now. It would make my job a lot easier. But
and you were talking about that too, about musicianship kind of being prepared beforehand, right?
Sure, and even regardless of what whether you're a virtuoso or not, just as a drummer, to be able to deliver your track confidently is everything. And
Right.
I don't care if you're AC/DC or Mahavishnu Orchestra. You know, if I don't care if you're going 2/4, you know, no fills. Just
Right.
the more competently you can deliver that track, it's noticeable.
It is, and it is. I mean, that's a very solid point. It is so much more than just being able to play your parts, and being able to play them to a point of competency where it's like there's no mistakes with that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and especially when you're trying to do pop music, which I mean, to some degree, we all do pop music. You know,
Right.
and it really shouldn't be noted as like a negative. You know, pop music. I love pop music. I'm
Yeah,
sure
we
you
do.
love pop. You know, we
Yeah.
all love pop music. And with that stuff, like there's a huge kind of priority put on the fact of like being able to play to the song, and that
Yeah.
goes so much further than just
Right.
being able to competently play your instrument. So
Yeah.
I totally get that. I totally
Yeah.
get that.
Yeah, I feel like in here, I'm a geek when it comes to gear and stuff, but my main focus is people, working with the bands and the musicians, and the gear is, you know, everybody has the same gear, generally, you know.
Right.
Mic pre's are mic pre's. I think mic selection is a little more critical, but
At least more personal among
sure,
different engineers.
yeah. But yeah, I like working with folks, working with people. That's my thing.
No, I mean, yeah, it has to. I mean, it's a huge, like, that is the job, is working with people. I mean, I learned it, I probably most clearly and first from Mike years ago when I first met him, Bolenbach again. He told me very, very bluntly and straightforward, he's like, hey, you're paid to hang out.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're, you know, if he's like, if you're an asshole, if you're not fun to be around, or if you're just boring,
Yeah.
he's like, then you're going to lose the gig, and
Yeah.
nobody's going to want to work with you.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a big part of it.
Got to make it fun.
Yeah, it's got to be fun. But you were saying beforehand that this place was never actually, you never intended it to be kind of a commercial place.
No, not at all.
And it slowly kind of turned into one.
What happened was we had the opportunity to make records in nice studios, and then when we no longer had a record deal, Dead Hot Workshop, my band, we had to come back here and make records, and it was shocking because there was nothing here at the time. Late 90s, there was Uranus, which is where we did make a record, right next door to a bar. You couldn't really start recording till 1 a.m., which was very hard for me.
I remember that was the last place that I recorded.
Yeah, and I love the place. I love Uranus. I have a very soft spot in my heart for it. Hate that it closed. Love the place, but it was hard to record there. And drums didn't. I had recorded in really good drum rooms, and now it was gone. And so I wanted a room that drums sounded good in. I didn't care what else. Nothing else mattered to me at that point. I just wanted a place to track my drums for my bands and for the other songwriters that I work with. And so I built the place, and it kind of took off. Jamie Wolford discovered it. A couple of producers around town discovered it, and we're like, okay, we're gonna make.
Well,
records.
I mean, like, once again, I mean, this place, and we'll walk around very soon here. I mean, it's a really incredible place. It's definitely not, your mom and pop's. We built this, hey, we were going to dedicate a bedroom to the studio type thing.
Yeah,
I mean, this
it's not a garage.
It's not. This was all an add-on. It was not a part of the
This
original.
is built to be a studio. Every room has its own foundation. All the ductwork is dedicated to each room. There's no shared ductwork. It's built to be a studio. When we're done here, when we move from here, I don't know what they're going to do with this place, but it sure would be a weird bedroom.
Right.
But I don't know, a guest house, or I don't know. Hopefully it'll remain a studio, Who knows, but.
And since then, have you had a lot of people bouncing in and out of here, other than just yourself?
I'm swamped. Swamped. I have been. It comes and goes. There was times last year where it's a little slow, but for the most part, I'm buried. I have work,
I mean, I'm sure the slow times are kind of nice, especially considering it was never intended to be used this way, That's when you finally get a chance to get in here.
I welcome a cancellation or two. I did not say that. Don't put that on there. But there are times where I get a cancellation, I'm like, yes. And that's not a good thing to say, but I can use the time because there's always maintenance. There is upkeep on these kind of places is crazy, It's
to a much smaller degree, I know, but yeah.
Every session something goes down. I'm like, okay, got to fix that, and it's never ending. But it's a labor of love for sure.
Well, to touch on that really briefly, because we did the last couple videos with, or the last video with my buddy Anthony, who's pretty against. Well, he's not against it in the tracking sense because obviously he wants to come. He wants to make this his place of tracking. But he's very against having any analog equipment for his mixing setup because he thinks that it's just in the way or it's not going to work every time. But for you and I, obviously, we're big fans of it.
Absolutely.
So how like, do you ever? Because I sometimes go back and forth on my necessity of needing it. And for you, how would you weigh those, like having this analog equipment, knowing that it's going to go down? Like, how important is it for you to have that?
I like having the option. I just did a band from Tucson. That wanted to go to tape. They wanted to do tape, and I don't do tape a lot. But first thing I told them was, you know what, call 513 Analog because that's what they do. They do it every day. That's their specialty. I highly recommend them. And they're like, nope. The guy who's going to mix it, Michael Butler in San Diego, he says you got to go to STEM. And he's an old friend of mine. So I was like, all right, well, we'll do it if you guys want to do it. And it was just nice to be able to do that, to have that option. Sometimes I mix out of the box onto the console. I just go direct out into the console, and then I use my reverbs. It's a deeper image. It's a wider stereo field. It's a different thing immediately. It's immediately different, and it's a little more work. It takes a little longer. I mean, your mix is kind of a performance. It's not something that I'll take a picture of it if I have to get back there. I can get close, but you're never going to get that. And it's kind of like the old days. A mix is like a performance, and so I love having options. I love having, I built this place not only for myself, but as I started bringing gear in and I started setting up the control room, my focus changed towards I want other people to come in here and be able to use the place. Without having to have a degree in how to run my studio, So it's very, very, very user friendly. A guy can come in here. I had a producer come in last week, walked in sight unseen at 10 a.m. and was tracking at 10:30. And I always have a kit set up, and the drummer he was tracking happens to have recorded here, so that helped. But he had never been in the room ever. And he just, he kind of put up a couple extra room mics just to make sure he had his bases covered, and he was up and going in a half hour. So I love that. That is, and if no matter what you wanted to do in here, it's pretty accessible quickly. We could be going to tape, here in the next, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. We could have a session going.
Yeah.
So it's all within.
Yeah.
And I like having the options.
Yeah.
And what you're, I agree that digital has many, many advantages, and I definitely, if you weigh the two, yes, there's a difference. Is tape better? It's a couple things to me. Yes, bass, kick drum, snare, sometimes vocals. Yes, there's a difference, and I do like it. But if I had to give up all the stuff that you have in the digital realm, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I get the trade-off, but what's wrong with having both?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, hybrid, and I didn't mean purely analog to tape. I mean, I assume that you work in a hybrid fashion most of the time.
Yes.
I mean, like we all do, I do as well. And I definitely, even still, then, I still do like to mix, to touch on how you were saying, spitting things out into a console and stuff. There's something about capturing moments in time, like a song or performance, and it is what it is. And then I think the mix being able to also be like a moment in time, something about that just makes sense to me. And it's not that I don't ever mix. Sometimes I do mix in the box, or I'll mix where my mix will be in the box, and I'll just use the console as a giant summing device. But I always usually tend to favor my mixes that are on the board, where I'm writing faders, where I know I can't replicate it perfectly. Every time. But there's something about that, because it's like, well, today at 1 p.m. I mixed this track, and this is what happened. And you either like it or you don't. And then when the band says we don't, well, then I'm gonna do it again. And then
and we're the only guys who are going to analyze our own mixes. So so that we know everything that's different. And it's really hard. But I do like the moment, because I want to mix. I always try to mix to the first-time listener. I'm thinking about the first-time listener. I want the guy who hears this for the very first time to be like, wow, that's impressive. That's what I want to do. That's what I'm after in a mix. And so it is neat to have. It's good. One thing you have to learn in here, when you own your own studio, I find myself coming back in here at 1 o'clock in the morning, midnight, and going back to work on stuff.
Right.
And you have to be good at saying, okay, it's done. I'm done. That's it. Let's make another record. Let's quit fixing that one. You know, and let's move on. And you do have to learn to say, okay, that's done. I'm calling it done. And and yes, you could open it up tomorrow and improve it. Every day. I do believe that. You could continually, and at some point you just have to say, okay, this is done and let's move on.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I forget who, there's that fame, a mix is never finished kind of thing. And I go back and forth on that. Some days I believe that mixes definitely hit a spot where they're, definitely finished and it's done. And I think the thing that helped solidify that, you were talking to Clark Rigsby's class at ASU. I went to that too. That's the only way I could meet him, because I kept on emailing him and he's like, yeah, we'll meet up. And he was just never able to give me a day. So finally he was like, just come to my class.
Good.
And I went to the class, and it just so happened to be a day that, I forget his name, Emmanuel from Tower of Power was speaking.
Yep.
And he was talking about making a record, a Tower of Power record back in the day, and they were working on a mix. So 4 guys on a console all had their fader movement jobs and whatnot. And he was like, we weren't happy. We couldn't the mix didn't sound right. So Al Schmidt walks in the room, big time engineer. Yeah. And they ask him, hey Al, listen to this mix. What do you think is wrong? And they play the mix, they do their moves and whatnot, and Al says, you went past it. He's like, the mix was back there somewhere. Oh, wow. You went right past it. And that has been one of the things that stuck to me too, along with the whole the mix is never done, because I definitely understand and I've gotten that.
Yeah.
Like, you never feel like a mix is finished.
Right.
But that too, I try to remember that too. I was like, you can go past it.
Yeah.
So.
You have to be able to put it on your Walkman, get on the treadmill, and go blank, and it has to go by. Once it can go by without me stop and kind of mindlessly go past, then I know it's a mix. Nothing caught my ear, and I have to almost listen peripherally sometimes like that, and not let it be the focus, and just. I'll never forget, one of my friends was talking about experience they had in the studio in Tucson, and they were saying, the engineer's never in there. Every time I look in there, he's in another room with his feet up. So one guy says, he finally approached him, and this is one of my favorite engineers. I love him dearly, and he's amazing. And one of the guys in the band, they were kind of intimidated by him. They actually called me and were like, hey, and I said, hey, go tell him, hey man, are you listening or what? And he says, tell Curtis I'm off-axis listening. And I love it. And I do know what he's talking about. Hey, if something pops up while you're reading your magazine, what the hell was that?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's kind of, I'm not a proponent of like leaving the room and reading a magazine or whatever, but yeah, there's times where when I'm doing something else, if it can pass by, then, that's a mix.
Right.
That's a mix.
No, yeah, and there's something for it. Once again, you have to catch yourself, and you have to listen to a song. We talk about that actually a lot in Anthony's video, where you have to listen to it as a listener and be like, okay, don't overanalyze, the damn bass guitar or whatever.
Right.
Like, what's the point of the song? Are we on a verse? Okay, can you hear the vocal? Does it make sense? Are you supposed to understand the words? If so, can you? And all that stuff. If you're gonna analyze that stuff, but even then, I try my best to just play the song and sit back and just do this and just listen. And I'm like, okay, after I listen to it, was that enjoyable, or do I want to go back? Is there something in my instant memory that wants me to go back and say that verse just wasn't right? Yeah. Kind of thing. And I try my best to do that. Yeah. And that's tough. It's tough.
It is. And some mixes you're more invested in, and it's for whatever reason, there's just maybe you like the song more, maybe you like the band more, maybe I made a record for a guy recently who told me this is the most important thing I've ever done in my life. He's an older guy. Mm-hmm. I've known him for years. He was in bands back in the day, and he's like, this is it. This is my swan song. This is and I felt a little bit of like, oh, this is, and you have to balance that with the knowledge that this is not, nobody's gonna hear this outside of a few friends.
Or it might not be your cup of tea or something.
Right. It was actually really beautiful. Tim McDonald is the guy's name. It's really great. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done here. It was really cool. Yeah. But I felt really kind of a little bit intimidated by the fact that he he placed so much weight on this recording,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, and that's tough. I mean, you know, you kind of touched on it earlier too, like the idea of having to fall in love, and I've said this many times, you know, having to fall in love with everything you're working. I mean, I try not to take work anymore because I mean, obviously when I started out, it was like anybody that was willing to give me their time, I was interested in working with. And then you get to the point where you realize that, you know, that's always not the best.
Yeah.
So I try not to take gigs that I know that I won't benefit in
Right.
some, or that I don't at least think that I'll benefit in some way. But even then, you know, it's there's still only like a handful of artists in town that I can honestly say that I personally love every song they've ever done.
Right.
You know, but obviously there's still a lot of other artists that I really want to work with, and having to find ways to love every song
Yeah.
so that every song, you know, gets your full attention. That's tough, and I you know, I know that that's something that you were kind of touching on too, like, you know,
a gift.
falling in love with the bad song.
It's an absolute gift.
Yeah.
It's a talent, just like it's a gift from God or whoever. It is I consider it a gift, and yeah, you must feel that. You know, I
Right.
feel like I do. I don't care what it is. I get into it, and I'll.
Yeah, you
You
have
know,
to. Yeah.
and I'll play it for my friends who are musicians, and they'll be like, "Dude, it's terrible."
Dude, it's funny because like when you told me that, I've had that same exact experience so many times where like I'm working on a project where even my roommates will be walking, be like, "What the hell is this?" And I'm like, isn't it great? Like it's so different. It's just different, right?
Listen to this
Like,
part right here.
like,
Oh, you hear that? And they're
we
like,
made it
"Eh."
work, you know. And but you have to, like, you have to. That has to be your emotion and your that excitement has to be there every time. I think.
Yes.
Otherwise, you shouldn't have taken the project.
Right.
You know, or you should at least be honest with yourself. Like somebody else would probably have a better reaction to this, and they should be working on it.
Right.
You know, and I try my best to stop. Like if anything isn't doing it for me, or if like maybe I tracked something and it was all fine, but we come to the mix, I'm just not feeling it. I try to pass it off.
Right.
And I say, hey, try working with like I pass a lot of things off to Anthony. I'm like, hey, you know, I hand it to Anthony because he's another person that's really great at just making things work.
Yep.
No matter what, he always finds some aspect of it to love, or some aspect of it that he just like clings to, and it turns
Yeah.
into a song. He turns it into a song.
And sometimes within a project, if there's say an eight or 10 songs, sometimes if you find the fix to one of those songs, it's
Right.
something that can work in other places within those
Right.
8 songs.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the, you know, finding that, you know, that missing ingredient in their writing sometimes, or in their arrangements, or, you know, it could be something as simple as the way they go from verse to chorus. Some of the bands I work with have never been in. Yeah, I work with a lot of young bands, and so the only way they've ever heard their music is in a warehouse practice place,
Right.
really loud,
Yeah.
and invariably,
Bouncing off walls and
oh yeah,
everything,
invariably they'll come in here and say, "What do you play right there?"
Yeah.
I've been playing that song for 6 years. I never knew you play that.
Yep.
And that's you know, many of those things start to come together, you know, and I highly recommend these guys, you know, practice with headphones, or at least demo your stuff so
Right.
that you know, so each guy is aware of the other's parts.
No, totally.
That's kind of a common thing that we run into.
Some years back, I remember there was a punk band I worked with. They're no longer together. They were called Throb Zombie, and they came and did like a record in a day, pretty much. But it was funny because the lead guitar player was playing his parts, and the other guitar player, the vocalist guitar player, the band was like, "What? Like that's what you play?"
Yeah.
I remember that was the first time it really hit me. I was like, almost every song, the vocalist, who I'm sure is, you know, listening to him sing, listening to himself sing, he was finally like, he's like, it's like, that's a cool part. Or it was
Yeah.
like, that's what you're playing? What's going on?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And I thought it was hilarious. It was the first time it hit me. I was like, you guys really should,
Yeah.
you know, figure out these parts before you come here and lay it down as the final take.
Yeah, it kind of blows my mind that there isn't more preparation like that with, and it's a very common thing, you know, and I think it has a lot to do with what you can get away with in a room full of drunk people is so different than what you can get away with in here, and especially, I know this from experience. We were a band that people loved us drunk in a bar. We got in the studio early on, and we weren't what we thought we were, and it was immediately evident. And one of two things happen right there. You either maybe I'll take the real estate license class or whatever, or you say, fuck that, I'm gonna get in there and bust my ass, and I'm never gonna be unprepared again. That was my frame of mind.
Right.
I'll never ever walk in that studio door unprepared again, ever, and I never did. And that you know, I think that's kind of it separates the people who become
Right.
proficient at this and the people who it's a hobby.
Yeah, and it's something that I think is definitely kind of getting hurt by just the changing of the times. You know, budgets declining and studios becoming more of like an anybody can kind of do it kind of thing.
Right.
Like DIY recording becoming more of a thing, which is good and also in some ways bad. I think, only because for me personally, like I was telling you, any good traits that I attribute to myself as a musician, I owe entirely to the fact that I recorded myself and was able to hear. I mean, because it's the best teacher for me, anyways,
Absolutely.
on how you play. I was like, you know, as a guitar player, I would record myself playing guitar and be like, oh wow, like I don't sound how I imagined
Yep.
I sounded, you know. And once you finally get over the fact that it's not your microphone or your technique or your recording equipment or whatever, and you're just left with it's my hands.
It's these, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and
Yeah.
I knew, I mean, my heroes as a teenager, I'd, you know, get Guitar World magazine or whatever and read about, you know, people saying like, yeah, 80% of playing is your hands, your tone is your hands.
Yeah.
And, you know, it kind of, I got that, but at the same time I was like, yeah, you know, but I sound good.
Yeah.
Out of my amp at, you know, 9 in front of me and blaring, blowing my ears up, you know, and then you record it and you play it through a smaller speaker at a more reasonable level, and you're like, oh, it doesn't sound like, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, whoever you look up to.
And in here, what's amazing is I you know, it varies, but there's times where I have really spectacular players. Do you know Tommy Connell by chance, a guitar player?
I feel like I've heard his name, but I'm not
I just
personally.
he was in yesterday, and we've never met each other. We know we have like 170 common friends on
Right.
Facebook, but we had oddly enough never met. And he came in and did some stuff, and oh my God, he's a remarkable player. And the thing that caught me the most was how quiet he played. A nylon string thing, and then he has a big another hollow body which is the painted on. You ever seen the hollow bodies with the painted on F holes? They're not. He's got like a really old one of the first 50 made Gretsch, you know, the big hollow body, and they're kind of noisy, and any little creak or anything, you hear everything. I heard nothing. He was so clean, and he didn't even move. He got set up like this, and his right hand just moved like this. That was it. Barely moved, and he had so much control over what was going on. It was great. It was so when you see somebody, and you know, having a guy like that, and then having another guitar player track, and him in the room saying, "Hey, try this." Try this. Whoa, wow, that's, you know, little tips and things like that. Those are the most valuable from the really good players telling the younger players, you know, try this, try that.
Yeah.
You know, tuning tricks and things like that. It's really neat. And you know, those kind of lessons to me are so much more important than technical stuff. You know, if you have a really good performance, we could put a cassette player in here and hit play and record, and it's going to sound pretty damn good.
Absolutely. I was reading about the new Arctic Monkeys record, and I believe it was maybe not the new one, but it was either the new one that just came out or a one previous where they said that a lot of that stuff was done to 4-track, like to cassette tape or something, or some low fidelity recorder.
Yeah.
But they were, you know, they had a nice sounding room, of course, and Arctic Monkeys are pros.
Right.
So, you know,
Right.
but they used a lot of that stuff and they just bounced it into Pro Tools, and that was the foundation of the record. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that stuff works if you adjust yourself to what you're doing, and you remember that it's your performance that you're capturing, not anything.
Right.
I think it's easy because I'm guilty of this too, where I walk into a studio as a younger kid learning, and I say, oh, look at all this stuff that I can manipulate audio with. And you think that it can make you sound better in some way, but it's like a lot of it has to start with the source. You know, and we forget. It's easy to it'd be like we've got this console, we've got all these effects and gears and compressors and stuff. We can make it sound good, but it's like it's still got to be the source. That's
Sometimes I learned the most by trying to make a snare sound like something else after the fact. You know, so I did learn how to use a lot of the plugins, but the easier thing is and one thing we do have access to now, which is great, is like you were saying, looking up a recording session and they use this on the snare.
Right.
I just did there was a Robert Plant record with Alison Krauss, and there was some acoustic guitar on it, and I really liked it, and I was able to look it up and find out how they recorded it, and that's invaluable. You could spend a lot of time trying to get that sound, or you could start where they started, you know, and you know, so that kind of access is really, really different. Something we have now that.
I remember, like, for me, the first time that was, you know, Gear Sluts. before YouTube and stuff. One of the first ones was Butch Vig going on there and detailing, like putting up his documents and notes about recording Nevermind.
Yeah.
And reading, I remember I was really interested in reading out like, that's when I learned about drum tunneling and like the microphones that he liked to use and, you know, the Sound City techniques that he used. And that stuff was huge. And that's how I initially learned how to mic a drum set, really, was reading the Butch Vig papers, you know, and trying it out to the best of my ability.
Right.
Excuse me. To the best of my ability with the equipment that I had at the time, you know.
Yeah.
And it was huge, and that stuff is pretty huge. It's definitely a big thing. But on that, let's take a look around because you have a lot of interesting gear here. So let's start with the obvious. You've got this beautiful Trident console.
Trident 80B. This was my favorite console. This is what I wanted. So when I built the place, I initially had an Amec, but I had a guy looking for one, and I wanted one with the EQs on the tape returns. So they're kind of rare. It took about 6 years, but when he found one, he let me know, and this used to belong to Hall & Oates, and it was in upstate New York. And they
came a long way.
Yeah, so they moved it to Salina, Kansas. Thomas and I went and picked it up in Kansas and drove it home. And so this is where everything starts. Most everything I run on the console. I run my kick in and my snare top on the APIs. Other than that, and my overheads I run on the Neves. Other than that, I stay wonderful EQs on here.
Yeah.
If anything, they probably tempt you to use them too much. But they sound pretty. They're pretty sounding EQs, very musical, very wide bell, just a real pretty sounding EQ.
There's something about a channel strip for me too. I love the idea. Like even on outboard stuff, I'll always favor an input that has an EQ attached or a compressor attached or something that's got. You know, I don't always use it, but it's nice to know that it's there. And it might just be voodoo in my mind, but I feel like the more stuff along the path, just the fatter sound I get. I don't know if there's any truth to that, don't quote me on that. But I feel like my sounds are better when I got like a channel strip on something, you know?
I like the strip on consoles. I've had when we get into gear, like outboard gear that has EQs and compressors in them, they're not as good.
Yeah.
You know.
It depends, yeah.
Yeah, depending on I like this. I love that Sebetron, and I've had some other outboard pre's that had like the full channel strip, and I always end up just using the pre because you know.
Right.
But these EQs are wonderful.
Yeah, they're definitely known for that, and it's also cool. I mean, these old big consoles always have such history to them, and it's kind of this one is no stranger to that.
The one thing I love about the ADB is the routing. So for instance, when I went to tape recently, it's like a Mackie. It's so simple. Whereas it's like a 9000.
Right.
There's other consoles are so complicated, and it takes you a minute to get oriented. You can one of these. I don't care if you've never used one. It's so simply laid out. They're really easy to use, and you know, you can go from these to faders. You can flip.
Right.
And you can just put up I had 4 separate stereo mixes going, and it's quickly. It's just it's so easy to lay out.
Yeah.
But what I do, go ahead.
No, I was going to say in these old split monitor designs, they're definitely a little more straightforward than the more modern inline. That's usually what it is. Because the inline designs, it's just they can do the same, but you have to. There's a switch and a button to get it to do everything that these can do.
Right.
Whereas this is designed literally just where each thing has its own function.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
I love the way they're laid out. And then from here, I have a tie line. These are my patch bays, so all my room inputs are across the top, normal to the first 30. And then I have a tie line that goes over to my equipment racks over here. And these are kind of, these are all mic pre's and EQs here. These are compression here, and then my reverbs here. And I don't do too much off of the console. I'll go kick and snare into the APIs, distressors, and the 560s.
Okay, yeah.
And then I'll go overheads out of the Vintex, and sometimes I'll go into here or into the LA4s and compress the overheads. Vocals, I'll always come out. I'll use one of my weird pre's, and I either go LA2A or 1176. And just lightly limit, and save everything else for the mix. I don't do too much on the front end. and I try not to EQ too much on the vocals. If you get the right mic, you shouldn't need
Right.
to. So I have a good selection of mics.
Yeah.
So actually, we could probably go in there next. And
Well, I wanted to ask you a
Okay.
couple questions. I mean, because these are, I've seen these a lot. I really want to pick some up. These are the Cappies, right?
yes,
Yeah.
fantastic. I mean, I've had side by side. I have 4 312s, so the real 312s, and I actually use these. I prefer these to them.
I've been hearing that a lot. I mean, a lot of guys will say it's simply just it wins out because of the attenuation option.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
Yeah.
the API classic problem is that everything's too hot.
Yep. And you can. There's times where on my regular 312s where I have the gain all the way down and it's still too hot. So
Yeah, and then you got to pad it, and I know
Right.
we're all convinced that the pad on the API changes the tone.
I think so.
You know,
I
so-
try not to. I have it in both of those right now, but I try not to use it. But yeah,
Right,
there's,
yeah.
there's sometimes I have to. But I do like that they run hot like that. That's kind of why I use them, or what I use them for.
And then, do you favor at all? I mean, I've been talking with a friend about the differences between the 550s and the 560, the graphic versus the classic 550 version.
If I am going to use something on vocals, these are preset, and so I kind of like where they're at. Kick and snare, though, I love the 560s. I just love the graphic.
Yeah.
You can kind of, without even listening, I mean, you shouldn't, but I mean,
Right.
You can kind of set your EQ.
Right.
It's pretty
Yeah,
simple.
it is kind of nice just being able to kind of toggle. I don't know. There's something
Especially for
about
kick and snare. You know what you
Yeah.
need. You don't. There's no. Nothing's gonna. It's not gonna be that different. So.
What are these inward connections?
Yes, those are great. Those are really high gain. Those have a couple of.
Oh, they're mic pre's.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're probably 20 extra dB. I mean, they're very, very high. A lot of headroom.
Yeah.
I use them for ribbons, or sometimes the 57, or not a 57. SM7 might not have the.
Oh, right. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Those are low output mics. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll give it a little.
That'll give it
sweet.
enough.
I love inward connection stuff. They're
I've got 2 of their 500 series compressors. I really love them.
They're great.
Yeah.
I've never used any of their gear that I didn't love.
Yeah.
And a guy brought in had a lunchbox and he had one of those in it, and we did acoustic guitar, and I was like, I'm getting one of those. And ended
got
up
2.
getting 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are great.
And then you were telling me a little bit about this guy down here.
That is a Magna Quarter analog domain. Andy Barrett built that. It's just it's a mic pre with an amp block back here that drives a speaker. It also drives an external speaker. There's an output in the back, and I have that in the bathroom.
Wow.
And I'll reamp, sometimes snare, into my bathroom.
Get a
and
reverb
then
chamber kind of
just
thing?
a different,
Yeah.
just a special kind. I have a slate floor in there, and it's kind of live,
Interesting. And you were saying it's a tube input?
Yeah,
or-
it's tube.
Tube based?
Oh yeah, that's it's 1959 circuitry, so it's
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of
It looks super retro, yeah.
back when they knew how to do things. I don't know. I love it. It's a really, really, really cool piece of gear, and great for vocals. It just has a lot of just great presence. Really, really nice sounding pre.
And I remember when I first met you, the other time I was here, you were telling me that you were a big LA2A fan over most other compressors. Is that still true?
I am, but Jim Scott was a big 1176 guy. Like he had his own rack full of them.
Right.
And I was looking at some of my notes from our session, and I had his compressor settings for Brent's vocals. And recently I did a singer who had a voice similar to Brent's, and so I put his 7 and 8. I copied his settings on the 1176, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love 1176s too.
Yeah. I'm definitely that. For me, 1176s are kind of my go-to, just because I feel like they can do anything. But
And these, by the way, are fantastic.
the warms?
Yes, they're
I mean, I can't hear. I don't think of anyone. I can't think of anyone that said that they're not. I mean, I think the common thing that I've heard is that they do what they need to do.
Yeah.
They work like an 1176. I
Yeah.
think some of my friends might say that tonally they're a bit brighter than a different one. But I mean, all I'm looking for out of 1176 is the reaction. The way that they do their thing. Sonically, I always just chalk up the tone, and I'm like, well, moving on, kind of thing.
Oddly enough, I probably shouldn't admit this, but I don't hear these subtle. Even like I'll be watching tutorials and they say, I put the plug in, now listen, and then I'll take it off, now listen. And I'm like, no, I don't hear the difference. It has to be radical to me. I think, I do think there's times where it actually sometimes benefits my mixes in that I need stark
No, for
differences.
sure.
I need things to really jump out,
For sure.
or I don't hear it.
Yeah.
And I don't, you know, I don't consider it a liability. But I don't hear the subtle, you know, if it does what it's supposed to do.
I get what you're saying, Del, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually won't. If it is a question of like that subtle type of thing, I'll stay in the box, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I'm just like, well, it's just less stuff in the way.
Totally, yeah.
You know, and I'll only go out I usually go out of the box most of the time when things just aren't sitting right. I'll usually find that just buffering the signal from running through patch bays and cables or going through a transformer or something, it gives it that little bit of a hug or a massage. It's just like, now it sits right.
Yeah.
Yep. Like I didn't really change the tone of it a whole
Right.
lot, but for whatever reasons, voodoo happened and now it's sitting right. And that's usually the only time I'll go out.
Yeah.
And otherwise I'll stay in the box because if I have good sounds, I don't need to kind of venture out anymore.
And mostly I use the stuff on the front end. I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Always on the front end,
when I do mix out of the box, I go all the way out of the box. I don't use any plugs. I go 100% out of the box, and I will use automation. I'll automate in the box, but
right. It's just easier, yeah.
Yeah, all my verbs, delays, everything. Then we go here, and once you get here, you're in way better shape as far as reverbs go. I'm not a big fan of plug-in reverbs. There's a few
They're getting better. I really like I like Sound Toys. I like their
Love
little
Sound
plate.
Toys.
And I'm actually a big fan of Reverb. I feel like it takes tweaking. You can't.
What's
Reverb I think is waves, but it doesn't sound good just from putting it on something. You definitely have to tweak it quite heavily. But I've learned it from using it for so many years that Reverb is one of my go-tos.
I like the UA 224. I love that so much that I would wish I had a real one. I'd love to get a real.
I'm sure I'll see one in here eventually.
Yeah. One day I'll get one. I love the remote. Those are pretty cool. But I like that. I like the EMT.
Oh, of course.
That's really cool. Also, the record plant, the convolution reverb they have. It's really kind of pricey, but but it has a picture of the room. You can move your kit anywhere in the room. You can move the mic anywhere in the room. It's it's a pretty complex. It's a lot. It's pretty. It uses a lot of processor power.
Right.
But I have like an octa card in there, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the UA stuff. I love Sound Toy stuff.
Yeah. No, Sound Toys is great.
I like plugins. When you put it on, you know what it's doing. You don't have to.
Right.
You don't have to listen to subtle differences. It's like, holy shit, you got to dial it back.
No, I feel you. Because definitely, and with the subtle stuff, I feel like you should have just tracked it better, or just get it there at the source for those subtle things. I don't really want to have to deal with subtle moves, unless I have to. And then lastly, at the top here, you've got. I'm kind of curious. Oh, 165s.
Yeah, I don't use those much.
Really?
I don't. They're. I prefer those. I mean, these were more expensive. I just prefer those. I can use them easier. I've used them more. That's probably, and not only rarely, but maybe on bass. And I prefer these to any compressor.
Oh, the Game Brains?
Oh yeah, to any compressor. That's my favorite compressor, number one.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I actually remember you telling me that too. What are these guys?
Those are DSers, Quad 8 DSers
Okay,
out of a console, out of Quad 8 console.
Yeah, Quad 8.
Yeah, they're neat. Those are kind of neat. You can.
So analog DSers, huh?
Yeah, do on like hi-hat or sometimes even like a really bright guitar track. Sometimes it's nice to have the bright track and just take a little bit of the annoying thing out. Those are great. Those are pretty surgical.
Great.
Pretty neat. Don't use them too much, but.
Yeah, I mean, de-essing is definitely something where I find a plugin just work. But I don't own a.
The truth is, plugins you could do anything on there. You could do much. In fact, they're actually more, probably more surgical.
Yeah.
But once you get used to using those, so for me, it's just force of habit. It's something I did long before there were plugins.
Yeah, familiarity, totally. I totally get it. Then we kind of glossed over it, but you mentioned that you are able to do 24-track tape here.
Yes. Yes,
I am. This is an old MCI?
Yep, it's MCI JH24, Sony era.
Is it original or refurbed at all? Or?
Nope, it's 100% original. I got a really, really, really good deal on it, and it had been cut. The lines had been cut, and it had been put in a storage area, and a guy bought the storage unit it was in, and then started selling the pieces, and I bought this from him. So I had to wire the remote up and wire all the multi-pin connectors in the back myself, and it was pretty.
Oh wow, so it did take some work, huh?
Yeah, but I mean, I got this thing for $200, so.
Oh.
And
yeah, well,
I used it a week later. I did a session a week later without doing
Everything works on it now?
Everything works on it.
Nice.
Everything. And since I've had it, I've had it completely gone through, power supply rebuilt, everything recapped, everything that was wrong with any of the cards replaced. I have extra cards. I did all that, all the maintenance.
Right.
But like all the lights are out,
That's pretty normal.
Yeah, there's one light, top right.
Oh, that one works?
Yeah, and when I went in to get it worked on, I said, hey, can you put lights in the other 23? He's like, dude, just wait for that one to go out and you'll be good. So I'm waiting. It's been years.
Still waiting.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, keep going. And then last, before we head into the live space, I want to talk about your monitoring just really quick.
Oh.
You got these Barefoots.
I love them. I love those. These are first generation Barefoots, and I've had them since day one. These used to belong to Janet Jackson. It's true.
I think you told me that, yeah.
She was getting hers painted red. And
that's
these were
right.
her loaners.
That's
so,
right. Yeah.
So I got a deal on them. I love these. Very accurate. I can track loud in here, which I don't prefer to do, but sometimes a bass player wants to track and feel like he's playing loud, and so I'll put earmuffs on and we'll crank it in here, and it's loud. And
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by their whole design of the subs on the side and stuff. I forget, there's a very specific reason why he does that. I forget it, but I'm very intrigued by hearing those, and I'd love to hear them sometime.
Yeah, we'll fire them up in a little bit. When I went to buy these, I went to Vintage King LA, and they have that rolling rack where you can listen to a new set of monitors. I brought my own music, and they gave me a couple hours in there, and they let me listen to every set of monitors as they come up. And the only two head and shoulders above everything else were these, and the ATCs were clearly better than everything else. And these were twice as loud, and so I
went with those.
And they were the same price. They were both.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
Yeah.
But they are. I mean, I do kind of consider Barefoot and ATCs. I mean, ATC's been around for a while, but they are kind of taking over the market. Whereas you used to see before my time, but in the '90s, it was like NS10s and Genelecs everywhere.
Right.
And that still is a classic combo that is everywhere. But
I like Genelecs.
I love Genelecs. But I am starting to see in studios of higher calibers starting to carry Barefoots or ATCs. You mentioned earlier 513. I think Catherine has ATCs.
Does she? I love ATCs. I liked the footprint was smaller, but they weren't as loud. And these aren't. I'll come right out and say it. The ATCs are more accurate, you know. But I think Genelecs are more colored than these are. They sweeten things up a little more than these do. And I get at least 80% through my mix before I get off the NS10s. I do everything on those, everything.
Yeah, you're sticking on those?
I mix till the very end. I'm on those.
Interesting.
And I pop in these, and it's like, whoa. Because it's.
Do you have, when you switch to the NS10s, do you have a sub at all with them, or is it just? Oh, it is the sub?
Yeah, and I'll go, and I don't use the sub with the NS10s. I use it with these. So
okay.
I leave it off for the NS. That kind of defeats the purpose,
right?
A little bit. I want it to sound like a truck dash speaker, and they do. They're terrible. They're great. This guy that was in here have you seen those Amphion?
I have. They look. They're very modern looking, aren't they?
Oh, they sounded
they're
good.
really thin.
Yes,
yeah.
They sounded good. They have no bottom end though.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the thing, He popped them up on top of my NS10s, and I really liked them.
I've seen those. Yeah, I've seen those popping up too a little bit. But yeah, clearly by and large, I'm seeing either Barefoots or ATCs in a lot of the bigger studios. Yeah,
and if you need a softeted speaker and you don't have one, and I didn't want to do that here. I don't know how many studios I've been in. They have those huge, gigantic softeted speakers, and they don't use them.
But realistically, you need to be like 20 feet away from those things, or 15 feet away at least. And I mean, this is a much bigger control room than most. Especially, like we were saying, Phoenix doesn't have big studios.
Right.
This is a big studio for Phoenix.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely not quite big enough for needing a socket.
Right. I thought about it. I weighed it heavily.
Would have been cool. Would have looked cool.
Yep.
Just to have the blow back speaker.
Oh, believe me, I thought about it. I got kind of excited about the possibilities, but in the end, I need something that's functional.
Yeah.
Even these were big for me. I almost didn't get them because of the size. And these stands have concrete in them.
They are very heavy duty stands.
Oh my God.
How much do they weigh, the speakers?
It's tremendous. I mean, I don't
they're
know.
bolted. They're bolted on.
They're
these
like
stands.
they're like 80 pounds each, maybe more.
That's a lot of weight.
They're heavy.
Yeah.
They might even be more than that. But the stands outweigh the speakers 3-to-1.
Yeah.
They're ungodly heavy, and I
Well,
don't.
they're
even-
not moving.
Yeah, my UPS guy told me he got injured putting them on my porch. Told me he hurt his back. He comes to some of our gigs. Said he
Labor of
hurt his
love.
back loading them on my porch.
That's awesome, though. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
but I do like these. I'm very, very pleased, and I'm a believer in you could mix on anything you get used to. As soon as you're able to realize how it's translating, you know. And for me, I have like the worst car stereo in the world, but that's where I get.
Yeah.
I take more mixed notes in my car than anywhere else because. I've heard everything I've ever heard. I heard it in my car. You know.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I'm actually really bummed. I was involved in an accident this last week, and my truck that I've had for nearly a decade is totaled.
Oh, no.
And I'm all right. Everyone's all right, and it's all good, and you know, I'm not responsible. But I was bummed because I was like, man,
That's your
this has been my reference, man, for so
Yeah.
long, and I got to get a new car, and I got to learn the stereo all over again. But I had my
Oh,
truck
same
dialed,
thing.
and I knew exactly what was in my. I was like, this is gonna sound good if it sounds good.
Yeah.
To me in here, it's good.
Yeah,
You
and for my car, you know, bass. It's really if the bass isn't just right, the speaker rumbles, you know, and it's
Right.
It's perfect.
Yeah,
you know?
you just learn these things,
Yeah.
and I was really bummed to see my truck finally go.
That's a drag.
But yeah, I totally get it. But yeah, let's move on and we'll check out the live space. So this is your vocal booth where you were talking about having a lot of vocal options is definitely crucial, and we've got tons of vocal options. So let's kind of go through some of these.
Alrighty, I have the Flea U47 clone. Very, very cool mic. Very, very, very faithful to the original,
Yeah.
or so I hear. I don't own an original, so can't
Well,
really.
they're super expensive.
This is also a copy. This is a C12 American Audio. I absolutely love this mic. It's a really cool mic. Great for like women singers, higher pitched singers, I think. The Cactus is a cool mic.
Oh, the
Some
blue?
people- blue. It's just a tube mic. It's a little darker, and it sounds kind of tubey. I like it, but it depends on the singer.
So these three are all tube mics.
Yes.
Cool.
And then I have the U87 and the
U87.
Loudon Audio Clarion. This is one of my favorite mics. It's just a newer type of mic. It definitely has a flavor to it. It's not completely transparent, but really nice.
I'm really into Loudon at the moment. I really want to try to get one of their mics. Does this have the open switcher? Is that the other mic I'm
No,
thinking of?
this only has pad and then a roll off, the low end roll off.
And then different patterns at all? Oh, it does.
No, oh, does it? Oh, yeah. That's the pattern switch. So this, I was in New York City and went to this thing. What's his name? Fab DuPont. You know, he does that thing. We went to a recording session and he had this on the kick out.
Oh, interesting.
And then a vocalist came in and he came out from behind took this off the kick out and put it in the vocal booth and did her vocal with it. And I was like, I want one of those because both of them sounded great.
Right.
And anything that can do that.
That's how you sell a
I
drummer,
want it.
kick and vocals.
Yeah, and it was fantastic. And so he, later I found out he's actually works for them.
Oh.
So,
Shameless.
but I
plug
love
there.
it. It was great. No worries.
It's
I'm
a
glad
big
about it.
mic. Yeah, it's definitely a
Yeah,
big boy.
it sounds great. And then I have the Sony C-38. This is old school.
That's a classic mic, yeah.
This is a great microphone. Definitely has a sound to it, and it's kind of neat. And it has you can change the patterns inside, or the roll off is inside.
And you've got a battery in it.
Yeah, it doesn't actually. It only uses phantom to charge the battery. It's one of those.
Oh, okay.
Like the CADs used to do that.
I actually didn't know that.
And this has the patterns are here.
They're
And it's
fully.
V1, V2, M1, M2 for vocal or music.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
then-
really want to pick up one of those.
It's great. And then there's a tool that comes with it, and that does something as well, but I don't remember
I
what.
think that actually shifts the pattern, and the other one I think is the roll-off adjustment. If I'm.
Okay, yeah, this
Yeah.
is more of an EQ type of thing.
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
that the top
Yeah.
one, it's a variable pattern
That's what it
switch.
is.
Yeah.
So that's and I have others, I have other, but these are the most used.
The most used. I mean,
these
this
are the
is,
most used.
Between these here, I think you've got pretty much everything covered.
Yeah, and SM7s are very common vocals for me. I use
SM7 right over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, I did a session with Sarah Robinson where she did almost the whole session on the Flea, and there was this one part where she just really nailed this note, and it kept distorting. And even she was standing way back, and it was distorting, and I didn't want to pad it. So just that one note I had her do on the SM7, and I blended it in, and you cannot tell the difference. $4,000, $300.
There you go.
I couldn't tell the difference.
Do you use the cloud lifter at all with the 7? Or?
I do.
Yeah?
I actually do. Yeah, that's from the guy in Tucson. I do have one
Yeah,
of those.
because I had learned that too. That I didn't know that they were.
Love
they're
that.
here. They're based
Yeah.
out here. Yeah.
Yeah, he does. He repairs my ribbons too.
Yeah. Yeah. I really want to try both. I want to get. I got to get a cloud lifter box. I got a couple old ribbons and stuff, and a 7, and I've got a. I want to check out the ribbon mics too. So you got a ton of amps.
Yes. One thing I think it's important if you're going to try to talk people into coming to a studio, as opposed to their house. I think you have to have options. I got like 8 drum kits, 80 cymbals, 20 snares, 30 guitars, 20 guitar amps. You got to have options and they got to work. They have to be in good shape.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Ready to go.
Lowell Hunt makes a good coin off of me because he takes care of all my amps. But this is an AC-15 hand wired. This is a Dr. Z.
Nice. Yeah, those are getting popular.
Yeah, wonderful amp.
Yeah.
I love my matchless. That Dan Electro is really neat. This is Fopstar. This is Drew Foppy. He's the Lindsey Buckingham's guitar tech. There's serial number 1 and 2 belong to Joe Perry. Serial number 3 and 4 belong to Lindsey Buckingham. Number 5 belongs to me.
Nice.
Number 6, Josh Kennedy. I know everybody who owns one. This is awesome.
What's this dinky little suitcase thing up here?
This I bought at a thrift store in Poolsville, Washington. And I asked the guy, I said, hey, I see that little amp. He's like, no, that's a speaker. I said, no, I'm pretty sure it's an amp. He said, oh, it's a speaker. I said, well, how much for a speaker? He said, $5. And it's probably been on, I don't know, 80% of my recordings. It sits in a mix so nicely.
Yeah.
Beautiful amp.
Well, he's lost.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
Know
think
what you got. Know what you got all the time.
$5 speaker.
$5 speaker, not an amp.
So then, and I have an Alnico Blue in the bathroom that's always mic'd and ready to go. This is an old vintage 30. This is a British greenback. That's really old. I got that from,
Oh yeah.
from what's his name, from Wives. The little shredder. He gave that to me. This is a great amp. This is awesome. 100 watts.
Oh, the Fender? Yeah, I mean,
Clean,
everything
beautiful.
you've got in here is definitely like, totally classic, and yeah, you can imagine it being on many
Options. To me, it's important to if somebody comes in and says, I want to hear a Strat through a basement. I want to be able to give them a Strat and a basement that work
Right.
and sound good and sound like a Strat and a basement. So I have stock Strat, stock Telly, stock Les Paul, custom. The main flavors. I have a Barry, a nice baritone. Got some really nice acoustics, but options. That's what. If there's a reason to come here as opposed to recording at your house, it's
Right.
because
Options.
Yeah, let's try a 20-inch kick or a maple kick or a birch kick
Right.
or let's try a pasty cymbal, a Zildjian K. They all are so different. They all have their own personality, and you may not think about that kind of stuff when you're thinking about a song. But when you have it in front of you,
Right.
you can clearly say, oh, I'd rather have that. I like that brighter sound. Or, to have those options to go through makes you think about your music differently. It makes you plan a little differently. And like a lot of the guys that come here regularly, well, they know everything I've got, and they either know what they're going to use or they'll bring something. So
Right.
it's kind of, it's neat. It's nice to have the options.
No, that's huge. I'm definitely like in the beginning stages of collecting. And I've gone from having a bunch of stuff to selling it all and starting over and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I'm with you too. Like I definitely think that it's important to have options. Like you said, you've got some great acoustics. You've got some great drums. Where do you keep all that stuff, by the way?
I'll show you where I store some of my drums. This is the bathroom.
Also, reverb chamber.
This is, yeah.
Oh wow.
So this is an Eames. This is an old birch kit. The toms are out there. This is maple, drum workshop maple. This is an old 50s Gretsch kit. These are really neat. 20-inch kick.
Oh nice, yeah.
This is my live kit. This is a TJS kit that I haven't really recorded it ever. It's just I use it live.
To touch on the Eames, I'm actually very fond of those because Dowell Davis showed me those.
Oh, did he?
He's got an Eames kit, and
No
he's
way.
got. Yeah, I think he's got like at least two. I know of at least two, and he's got a snare that he had made twice, and it's one of the best sounding snares I've ever heard.
Thick.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a 28, by the way. I have it. I have that snare. Listen to these are the Eames toms. Listen to these things. They're just. I mean, these heads are ruined, but.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Doesn't sound great. They're not tuned or anything. That's just one guy beating the shit out of them.
No, just like Dowell's kit. There's just a lot of body. It was like the tone to body ratio. I thought was just great.
Deeper tone than maple, and I really didn't know the difference till. This is one of those kits, though. Kevin Redlet called me from Guitar Center and said, "Hey, we just brought a kit in. You should hear these toms." And I drove all the way out to Mesa, and I hit this tom. Boom! I was like, "I'll take it." I knew right away.
Sold.
I have nothing that sounds like that. I'll take it. And that's a great
I
kit.
asked him because same thing. Like he played the kit. I was like, damn, I really got to pick one of these up. And he's like, it's tough. You got to find certain users. He's like, apparently, according to Dowell, the guy that originally started the company isn't in the company anymore.
No.
And it's somebody else. And
But
he's like,
for
they're not
50
the
years,
same.
he built drums for 50 years,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of these around, and they're beautiful kits. And I did contact them because I wanted the hoops for the bass drum, and the guy was like, I doubt I could get it exact, so I just bought black ones. But because I have one, and I wanted the second one, and he said, I don't think I could get that color because these are older. These were like mid-90s.
Right, yeah.
So, but yeah, that guy, he was telling me about the original owner for 50 years. He built drums, and, I guess he claims that the recording customs that Yamaha stole his, and that's what the recording customs are, is his design, the inside.
I can see that because they do have a very similar kind of sound
Yeah.
and footprint, and they're very popular in recording for that reason.
I love recording
So
customs.
I
They're
can totally
great.
see that.
Yep. And this is this riser, the room was built, the drums were intended from day one to go here, and the way the treatments are built reflect that. And then the riser is 77 2x4s, nailed and screwed together. I can't even get it out the door, so it's here.
It's always here.
Yeah. Yeah, but, I thought, I didn't even think about it, but none of my doorways, I'll have to cut it or something.
Take it apart. Yeah.
Yeah, or just leave it. But it's only attached in 9 places, like a turntable.
Okay.
So nothing comes up, nothing goes through. It's very, very, very isolated.
Interesting, and it sounds good. I mean, you obviously nobody.
It's really cool. This room, it sounds like a bigger room. So.
And like once again, this is a big room for Phoenix, without a doubt. I would definitely not say this room is small. It's small for maybe like LA.
Right.
But for
Right.
Phoenix, this is a good sized room.
And what I like about this room is you can load it, you can fill it. So there's times I worked with a producer who he called it loading the room, and I've never heard anybody use that term, but he would if it wasn't loud enough, he would actually put the kick through the PA and make it louder and till the room was at like maximum volume, and that's how he would record. And it's neat. It's neat to do that. The drums sound so focused and punchy. It's a weird.
Yeah, just exciting. I mean, I get that.
Phenomenon, yeah. And it's loading the room. And I like having a room that's not so big that you can't do that if you want to, depending on what you're recording.
Totally. Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot to be said about, just getting the room to excite, especially with drums or anything acoustic,
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of that to be said.
And it's amazing how I've done strings, chamber music in here, beautiful. And People don't realize how loud strings are. They're so loud when you have an ensemble, and it's really a neat room. It sounded great. You know, I had like, actually it was Dave Nichols' session, but he brought in, I don't know, it was at least 20 pieces, and they had a conductor.
Oh wow, yeah.
And they all, you know, they all fit. We just put chairs in here, and it worked out great. It was really great. I was really impressed that, you know, I was able to pull that off. That I had 20 pairs of headphones.
So, you really did bust it all out, huh? Was everybody spot mic'd, or was it kind of a 2-mic capture thing? Or?
No, I think we had like 12 or 13 inputs, but nobody was, I think there was one guy who played what's the one where you mic the front of it?
Oh.
It might be like one of the, like an alto sax or something, the straight one.
Oh, the soprano sax?
Where it sounds all farty in the bell, but if you mic the front of it.
Oh, I'm not
That guy was the only guy that had his own personal mic. Everything else was overheads, but it came out great. Sounded great. You know, it was really neat it was a little nerve-wracking for me because they are kind of picky about their headphone mixes, you know, and they were
more so than a rock band.
Yeah. The chamber music people are a little, you know, but it was fun. It was great fun.
So did you have 20 of the Behringer set up for them, or?
No, I had I have like these all over the place.
Okay, so because that's right. You said you barely used. So your other headphone, your main headphone system is just more
these
of an
can be a
analog setup?
disaster if the person here doesn't know what he's doing, and
Totally.
that's commonly the
it's
case.
a lot of power in the hand of the musician.
Yeah, and they're like, I can't hear myself, and I'll put their mix on. I'm like, oh, what are you doing, dude? You know?
Right,
yeah. It can be and these compress. So if you turn your thing all the way up, you're not going to hear anything, and so you have to know what you're doing. But I'll do like a lot of the guys who play in churches. They're all over these things. Because that's what they have.
Because that's what's in churches,
Yeah. So or if you've even used an Aviom, this is like
similar,
easier, but the same principle. So, and this is my little R2D2. So this is all through this. I can put CDs, MP3s, or this has a USB. So I can go through a USB drive on this.
So any type of playback almost, pretty much.
CDs, and then my iPhone, I can play any medium here and play along, you know. That's kind of, and then I have the Pro Tools mix or Power Play mix. I have the Power Play going into here too.
Oh, cool. Very cool. So this is the lobby of the place, and you use this for reverb.
Yes, I do. I have a mic right there in the corner.
Old CAD mic.
Yes, a neat one, a very neat one. Those are hard to find, but really cool. And I leave that door open, and so the drums come in here and kind of rock it around. It's untreated, so it's kind of
it's got all
echoey, hey, got a little life to it, and it just makes for a kind of I call it big room. It makes for a bigger sound. And all these photos are my friend Maria Vassett is a local photographer, and these are all local shows.
Nice. Yeah, I was gonna ask. Like, these are some nice posters, some nice photos.
Yeah, she did a great job. Willie, gotta get Willie.
Yeah, keep the vibe up.
And then that symbol. Anybody who comes into my studio and can tell me every name on it, I'll give a free day in the studio. That's true, because there's one you'll never get.
Well, don't give it away now.
I won't.
I probably won't.
I don't even think if he came in here, he would realize that was him who signed it.
Oh, well, that's just cheating. And it's the coffee station.
Yes. That's the most used instrument in here. That. B3, Hammond B3, Leslie.
I was going to say, is this the combo? The classic combo?
Yes, the real
Does it get
deal.
used a lot?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
This is wonderful. It's like 100 watts, and when we get cranking in here, it's crazy. It's loud.
You just let it sit it right in here? You don't really move it?
I put this in here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's like church. So when I do mix out of the box, this is my 2-bus rack.
Oh, here it is. Yeah, you showed me this last time.
And I go out into that. So
this is what you print to?
Yeah.
Or wait.
I print to my Elise's hard disk, but I go through this process.
That's right, because you're still doing the hard disk printing.
So I have analog metering and digital metering, and then I have A to D, D to A, and then
in case you do print back into Pro Tools.
Right, exactly. And then I don't do too much in the EQ of the overall. Sometimes I'll brighten it up a little bit. I try not to do too much. And my mastering guy doesn't like me to go too heavy on this either.
Is this all step? No? Sorry.
But some of it is.
Yeah. The frequency, maybe?
No, I guess it's that.
Yeah, frequency,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah. No, I'm very familiar with the nail, their compressor version, and I've used that a lot.
I like
on a
the
mix.
nail.
Yeah.
I like the nail. In fact, I've thought about getting it in addition to that. This is really transparent in a really weird way. It does.
Well, on a mix, though, that's not terrible. You know,
I know, and you know what? You can do it. You can get really heavy-handed with it, and you don't. There's no artifacts. There's no pumping. It's really weird. I've never used a compressor quite like it, and I do like it, but you can't overdo it.
I've not. I mean, do they still make this? I've not really seen a whole lot of these.
I've never seen another one.
I was gonna say I don't think I've ever seen another one.
They're pretty amazing. I really like it.
Yeah.
I really like it, and if I got anything else, I would get it in addition to that. But I do like the nail. I've used that before, and
Yeah, the nail's pretty nice. I use that when I'm at Insuna because he's got that. And then Jim, do you know Jim Kerr?
no.
You'll have to meet Jim Kerr. Yeah, he's got the nail over at Insuna. I use it there. And then at my house, I just have an SSL clone.
Yep.
You know, big fan of the classic.
Yep.
But no, that's awesome. That's where that goes. So you,
Yeah, I don't use it a ton. I do, mainly when I go out of the box. But sometimes it's always good to bounce outside of the Pro Tools. If you can.
and it's nice. I enjoy it.
It does
I
make a
think,
difference.
I think at the very least, when I'm mixing in the box, I at the very least spit my two feet out, my two mix out. I always have that going to at least the compressor, or at least the EQ. I should say at least the EQ.
So
even
you
if
can
it's
hear it.
even if it's just doing barely anything, I just like to have something in the the final chain. It just makes me feel better.
Yeah,
it could
I
be
used to
voodoo.
always have this in, and I don't anymore. But yeah, it does help.
No, but it's cool that it's in a mobile cart. That's kind of
Yeah, and
handy.
I have a little mixing room out here that I use sometimes because sometimes if the studio's and I'm still editing and mixing, I have another little room I use. So
oh, cool. So you can take it over there.
Yep,
Awesome.
and I have these little Focal, the littlest ones. They're amazing. They're really great monitors. And they just they have great, really, really, really transparent, uncolored monitors if I've ever heard them. They don't hype anything, and they have just a great, really strong stereo field. Like you hear the smallest pan moves, you clearly hear them. You can tell from that to that. You hear it. It's really neat.
No, Focal's great. I mean, I currently mix on older Atom speakers. I've got P22s, and I really, because they were the first speaker that I heard. I was like, those make sense to me. But when I first heard Focals, I heard the Solo 6s, I think.
Yes.
And they reminded me immediately of Atom. I think they're kind of both going for the same idea in what a speaker should be, And I definitely, totally understand and get behind Focal. No, speakers are definitely totally a personal thing. I really like asking people about monitoring and what they enjoy, because it is very personal to how we hear and whatnot. And a lot of guys hate Atom, hate the Atom speakers and.
Andy, not Andy. Jamie Wolford always had Atoms. He used Atoms, and I liked them. I thought they sounded great.
Yeah, everything I think is hit or miss for different types of people and what they want to hear.
He had the A6s, I think. I think he had the 6s.
I'm not familiar with those.
And I had Dyne Audios here for a while.
That's one that I can never really understand.
I didn't like those. Of all the speakers I've had, those were probably my least favorites. And they weren't, fortunately, they weren't that expensive, so it wasn't that big a deal, but I didn't really like those. They didn't have any power. They definitely are colored, and not in a way that helps, So.
Yeah, because at MCC, Andy Siegel really liked to use the big classic ones, the BM15As.
Yes.
And I mean it's a fine speaker, but I remember I always thought that they did have a weird sound. Everything sounded to me everything sounded tinny. And had kind of like it, no matter what, it just sounded like you were in like a metallic space with those speakers. and it drove me nuts. But then in the other studio on campus, they had the Atom, the P22s,
Yeah.
and I was like, this
Yeah.
makes sense. Like, it sounds like what it sounds like to me.
My Dyne Audios, the best way I could describe it was, it just sounded like all my mixes sounded different here than they did anywhere else, and like different. And it was the monitors, you know, and I just never really got used to them. And I had them, but before that, for years, for probably 10 years, I had Event 2020s. I swear, there were many times when I first got the Dyne Audios, and those are like $200 a pair. I mean, they're super cheap. There were times where I wanted to go get those because they were just easier to use.
Yep.
I liked them better. I actually liked them better, and they're probably a quarter of the cost of.
Event had good stuff. I mean, I had a pair of the other speakers I liked were the Event ASP8s, the older ones.
Those are really good.
Those are good.
Are actually really good.
And in their day, they weren't hi-fi studio monitors. They were marketed as like mid-level, you know. But I thought that they were great. I thought that those sounded to me what like the Dyne Audio should have sounded like.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Obviously, different people will disagree, but I like the ASP8s. I stand by Event.
Yeah,
Totally.
I was many times I nearly went and what happened? I finally sold them to. There's another guy you might want to check. Brian O'Neill. Do you know Brian O'Neill from Jaffe's Descent? He's got a little studio, his house, out in his house, and he goes to 16-track tape only.
Oh wow.
Half-inch. He's got a half. Is it a half-inch? Yes, it's a half-inch. It's a Tascam half-inch, and a lot of my old stuff I've either given him or sold him, and I had 2 pairs of those that I had in a backup, and I gave him both of them, and he uses them every day, loves them. So,
Awesome.
And yeah, those events. The pair he uses, I had for 10 years, and gave them to him almost 10 years ago. So they're old. They're really old, and they work great every day. Perfect. Can't ask for more than that.
No, hell yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Curtis.
Thanks for
It's been great.
coming out. I really appreciate it.